Well, good afternoon. What a great turnout tonight, this afternoon. We appreciate you being here, and it's sort of gloomy outside, but there's a great warmth in here, isn't there? We're hot. Okay, yeah. Well, it's going to get hotter because we've got some great stories for you to hear this afternoon. Thank you to our storytellers today for their willingness to come and tell us about an episode in their lives. This is our 5th installment of Tell Me a Story. We're always looking for people who are willing to tell a story. So if one of these storytellers today triggers a memory for you, or if you would like to just run a story past Phyllis or myself or Joyce, give us a call. We would love to spend a little time with you and hear about what your idea is. Our first storyteller today is Jack Clark. Jack lives in Valley Apartments, and he came to Springmore in 2001. We're going to get Jack set so that he can be comfortable in telling his story. He's going to need to sit, but you can still hear him. Yeah, sit right here. Just like we did in rehearsal. Just like that. Pilot for American Airlines. Mm-hmm. Okay.
Testing, 1, 2, 3, 4. 4, 3, 2, 1. Uno, dos, tres, cuatro. Hello to y'all. Pardon me, I just got cleared for takeoff. I was not a war hero, but I did teach 50 Army Air Corps cadets to fly the PT-17 Stearman biplane, and then flew the world as an Air Transport Command pilot. Sample cargoes: the just released Philippine Death March prisoners of war were flown on a hospital plane from Casablanca to New York. And also, actress Marlene Dietrich was flown to Paris to entertain our troops. Well, how does an airplane fly? The Wright brothers at Kitty Hawk taught us that an airplane develops a lifting force as there is airflow over its wings. A pilot controls the angle of attack as the wing meets the airflow. Power is needed to speed the airplane. Now, for study purposes, a tornado may be visualized as if it was contained within an empty ice cream cone. Within the cone, the air pressure is very low, and a leftward curving high-speed wind is present. An updraft is there. And as the tornado nears ground contact, there is a wind reversal in a short distance. One side of the street could have a north wind, and the other side, it could be a south wind. Now, all of you are qualified to be a pilot or to be a weather reporter on television. My story is, I was a passenger, not a crew member. Passenger in the cockpit of an American Airlines DC-3 as we flew through a tornado. This flight was cleared to climb to and to maintain 4,000 feet. Shortly after takeoff, we entered a tornado. A violent updraft would not allow us to level off at 4,000 feet, but we were spit out of the storm at 10,300 feet. Captain Dugan kept full control of the airplane by changing the engine power and the nose pitch attitudes to keep within safety airspeeds. This flight proved to me that a quality airplane being flown by a competent pilot can operate safely in turbulent air. I began a lifetime research project to learn and to teach proper pilot technique when or near a thunderstorm. Airline flying is very safe. A small propeller airplane crashed in Buffalo on February the 12th in '09. Since that day, there's been no airline crash in the United States. No airline crash. And that's over 3.5 years of perfect safety. In that period, over 600,000 people lost their lives in automobile accidents. My wife, Jackie, a lovely lady, and daughter, Ann, also lovely, and I have a combined record of 79 years of flight crew service to you on American Airlines flights. My two sons are medical doctors. A life-saving heritage was delivered to Jackie and me. Our family attempts to honor and to build upon that heritage. And we are blessed to live here at Springmore. Thank you. Was that short enough? The time part.
What Jack is referring to is that we have a rehearsal with each of the storytellers, generally the Friday before we have the storytelling, and they've been instructed to prepare a story about 6 to 8 minutes long. And sometimes if you've had a great adventure in your life, it can be hard to shorten it to 6 or 8 minutes.
It sure is.
Okay. Thank you, Jack. Our next storyteller is Betty Howison. Betty lives also in Valley Apartments. She's lived at Springmore since October of 2005, so 7 years this month, Betty. She's going to tell us about a donkey. Betty? Okay.
I'll get it all together in a minute.
We want to test out the microphone here.
All right. Can you hear me now?
Okay.
Can you? You might think my donkey story is about the election. It's about the election, or else about Halloween, but it's about neither one. It's about a real donkey. And I'll have to tell you. My sons growing up, we spent time at Nag's Head. We had a cottage down there, and they knew all about it. They went to One Cheese, which is over on Rhode Island. And my middle son is Benjamin, so he got into a poker game over there with some of the, with some of the locals. And anyhow, he won the game. He was a teenager, and he was working at a fish house over there in One Cheese. So anyhow, they who lost the game said, I don't have any money, but I'll give you a donkey. And he thought, well, what am I going to do with a donkey? Well, he said, yes, I'll take it. So he took the donkey, and the man went off. And anyhow, he said, how am I going to get the donkey home? He said, well, I could put him in the back of the car, but I have to take the cushions out, because he did have an old car down there. Okay. But he couldn't get the donkey in. And the only way he could do it was he'd take off his underpants and put it over the donkey's head so the donkey couldn't see out. Then he could get him to move. So he moved him, and he took the cushions out of the back of the car, left them on the ground, got the donkey in the car. So that was quite a feat to do that. In the back seat, he had the head out one window and the tail out the other. And he started out for Raleigh. We lived in the country out from Raleigh. All right. He got part way down the road, and here came the blue light, stopping him. He thought, I've been driving right within the limit. I know I haven't done wrong. And the cop said, well, I was just curious to what you had in the car. He showed him, and he told him, he said, I'm taking that to my mother. Okay. And the cop said, well, good luck. Off he went. He came back, and he got to the house, and he said, the cop said, go ahead. So he did, and he got the donkey all the way to the back steps of the porch. So he tied him there, and he went up on the porch, and he said, and he was sitting up there, my husband, his father, and I was sitting up there, and he said, I've got a present for you. I said, what? He said, look down there and see. I looked, and I said, that? And he said, yes, it's the donkey. I said, all right, that's fine. Does he have a name? He said, no, he doesn't have a name. I won him in a poker game. I said, well, what are we going to name him? He said, well, let's see. There were a lot of newspapers scattered around on the porch, and everything said, sale, 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 clearance sale. He said, I know, we made him clearance. So we did. Not sale, but clearance. So from then on, he was the donkey named Clearance. Anyhow, he stayed there for a good while, just tied to the bottom, at the bottom of the steps. And we had I had a dog. A dog was carried away with a donkey, but he was very jealous, because we paid a lot of attention to the donkey, more than he wanted me to. So I said, okay. So the dog tried to bray like the donkey, but he never could manage it. He just couldn't. He just sounded like a dog, no matter what he did. Anyhow, So then we had to do something about the donkey. What in the world are we going to do with it? We wanted to go away on a trip. What are we going to do with the donkey? Because I think the children were mostly away in school by then. Okay, I saw an ad in the newspaper for a horse farm. And I said, oh man, I bet they like the donkey. So I called them up. And I said, can you come get would you like to have a donkey? We would, because we got a lot of mans and we like to sell mules. Of course, you all know where mules come from. The donkeys and the horses. So anyhow, I said, good, come get him. So they came in a big truck to get clearance. I didn't want him to go, but I had to do something. So they came and got him, put him in the truck, and goodbye. But no, the truck ran under an electric line and cut off all the electricity, everything around. Remember, this is 45 years ago. So it didn't have any electricity, but that's all right. I said, don't worry, I'll get it fixed. Go on with the donkey. So the donkey got put in the truck, and he went off to the horse farm. And I think he went to donkey heaven. End of story. Is that okay?
That's great. Thank you, Betty. Thank you very much. Thank you, Betty. Betty said that when she let her son know that she was going to tell this story, he started looking around and he found a picture of Clarence. It's a picture of Winky and Clarence and the car that Clarence rode in that day. She's got it with her. It's kind of small, so if she held it up, you wouldn't be able to see it. But if you really like the story, you could go by and speak to her afterwards, and she'll show you the picture. Yeah. Yeah. That's right. Our next storyteller is Helen Boss. Helen also lives in Valley Apartments, and she's lived at Springmore for 25 years, since 1987. How about that? She's going to tell you about her love of automobiles. Helen?
Yeah, some of us, is this okay? Some of us decided that since we had a time limit, we was going to have to read what it is we have. So I'm going to read most of it. The title is The Cars in My Life. My introduction to the world of transportation was in a 37 Chevrolet that propelled me from Raleigh, North Carolina to Oberlin, Ohio, near Cleveland, to visit my grandparents. I sat in the front seat between my mother and father behind the gear shift, with my brother standing in the corner. This Chevrolet that my father paid $600 for sold after the war for $800. A beautiful 47 Buick convertible took its place. I did take driver's ed in high school, and my father tried to teach me to drive without success. Then my brother, who was 2 years younger, took over the driving. I graduated from Broughton High School, Meredith College, and the Medical College of Virginia in Richmond, Virginia, with no driver's license. During my rotating internship at Medical College of South Carolina, 1 month I was given the night shift for outside OB, that is, delivering babies in the home. They gave me a Ford coupe with a hospital name on the doors. I didn't have the guts to tell him I didn't have a driver's license. I got behind the wheel and drove all over Charleston for a month. This town has residential areas, if you know anything about Charleston. The houses are around the block, and there is an alleyway that leads into the inside with a circle of houses on the inside. And those were the houses where I was to go. I had a map to show me the way. One night I was driving the wrong way on a one-way street, and on the corner was a policeman. Of course he stopped me, and luckily he told me how to get where I wanted to be. He also didn't ask me for any information. I was dressed in my intern's uniform, and the hospital name was on the doors of the car, so he didn't bother with asking about anything. I won't go into the details of the deliveries. That's another story. Another night I was driving into an alley, and I realized I was on the wrong one. The right one was across the street. And guess what? The car stalled. There appeared a man in the alley. He offered to help. He got in and started the car and backed into the other alley with me running alongside. When he got out, I realized he could hardly walk because he was so drunk. And I told him I'd better lock the car, knowing that I couldn't. And he said, "No, ma'am, nobody's going to touch that hospital car." Of course, he had just gotten out of it. That night we had a baby boy. I was supposed to take someone with me during that month because I was female. But it was June and all the med students were gone, so I had to go out and do all of this by myself. I was alone. Times have surely changed since the 1950-1951 year. I came to Duke for anesthesia residency, and after 2 years was on the staff at the newly opened VA hospital in Durham, so I needed transportation. I bought an old Studebaker Champion from an intern and drove it for a month on a learner's permit. Then I finally got my license and I could drive legally. This was when I bought my first Ford, a beautiful green and white Fairlane with dual carburetors. I later practiced anesthesia in High Point and Raleigh and continued buying Fords. I had a lavender Galaxy 500, 3 T-Birds, one in 60, one in 70, and one in 80, a green LTD, and a blue Crown Victoria. I did drive my husband's great big white 98 Olds for a while. When I came to Springmore, I had a Silver Streak T-Bird. For several years in the summertime, I drove some ladies from Springmore to the mountains in Linville, south of Boone, near Grandfather Mountain. My T-Bird was so difficult to get in and out that I traded it for Crown Victoria. This worked great, 4 doors, you know. Actually, Grace and Alan Furman, who are also residents here, drove in their white Cadillac the first time we went. And years later, Grace, in her 90s, drove there in that same Cadillac with me as backup. And then all our fun stopped. We were not invited to the mountains anymore. That's another story. I scratched my Crown Victoria on a mailbox and traded down to a Taurus. I didn't think I could adjust to a 6-cylinder, but I did. Besides, everyone was making and driving smaller cars. We still have to contend with the SUVs and the vans, though. Last year, when my old girl approached 10 years old, I looked for another T-Bird, one of the last ones. I could not find one. I guess they were just too good to give up. You may wonder why I have had so many cars. When I came to Raleigh, my CPA suggested that I trade every 2 years for tax purposes, and I almost did that. Whenever a car got to 70 or 80,000 miles or 2+ years, I traded it. And at that point, I never had to pay more than $20,000 for a car, which I felt was pretty nice. So I bought 9 cars and had intimate contact with 3 others, so that's 3 cars that I had experience with. Let's see. For some unknown reason, I always loved driving. Just getting behind the wheel and starting to go off is exciting, even if you're going to Food Line. I still drive to the beach 4 or 5 times a year. Takes about 3 hours, and I stop twice. And I drive alone except for my cell phone and my guardian angel. And I thank Henry Ford for that. Thank you.
My daddy went around and sell you a Chevrolet.
What?
I'm jealous of those T-Birds. I always wanted one of those. Anybody else have a T-Bird? Yeah, there's one back here. And Gregory is our next storyteller. She's lived at Springmore since September of '07, and she lives in East Apartments, and she's going to come share now. Out of there, so you have to kind of move the whole thing.
Okay, thank you.
See, does that
My
work?
talk is one step from heaven. Am
Is
I
that
hitting
loud
it?
enough? Can you hear her? All right, just lean into it a little bit.
All right. I arrived in Raleigh in 1929, long before most of you all got here. My first 5 years, I lived in a wonderful neighborhood in Hayes Barton that just abounded with children of all ages. When I was around 3 or 4 years old, I realized that my favorite neighbor lived next door. Her name was Mrs. Anna Neal Blanchard, and she was one of the sweetest ladies I have ever known in my life. When I would go to see her, she treated me just like I was a little queen, and she would ask me to play her piano. And I would bang, 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 bang with both hands up and down, and she'd say, "Oh, that is so beautiful, that's just beautiful." And then we would have a tea party. And I would say, "Oh, Miss Blanchard, this is just delicious. Could I please have the recipe for my mother?" I think we had a very mutual feeling for one another. Many years later, Charlie told me that when he and his older brother Lawrence saw me coming, they would say, "Here she comes," and they'd go up and get in their room and shut the door, which I can't blame them. But I told Charlie, "I think your mama wanted a little girl. I think you all were just jealous." When I was 5 years old, we moved to the country. Daddy bought land which has become Quail Corners and had our house built. There were no close neighbors and certainly no children to play with. You had to invent your own entertainment. We had a lane of mimosa trees, and I remember I would go out and climb one and pretend like I was on a boat. One day my mother and I were going to town to a fire sale at Taylor's on Fayetteville Street. We were going downhill at Wake Forest Road, and Mother was singing, and I asked her to stop singing, and if she didn't, I would get out of the car. Either she didn't hear me or ignored my request, so I opened the car door. Unfortunately, in the 1930s, the car doors opened backwards this way, and I was jerked out by the wind holding on to the handle. I finally dropped and rolled down the road. I remember cars stopping to see what happened. Fortunately, I wasn't hurt, but we didn't go to the fire sale, and I was laid up for quite a while. Mother should have run over me. When I was older, I went to Murphy School in town. In the 2nd grade, I had my favorite teacher, Miss Fanny Thomas. Everyone loved Miss Thomas. She had a little coupe car with a rumble seat in the back. And if you did something well, she would ride you around the block in the rumble seat. This was such a real highlight. I remember that one of our pigs at the farm had a baby pig, and I couldn't wait to get to school the next day to tell Miss Thomas that I had named the baby pig Fanny after her. Of course, she took this as a great compliment and thanked me emphatically. One other memorable time I will never forget was a Thanksgiving Day we had with relatives who always had every kind of goodies and candy to offer us. While there, I went into a bedroom and saw a box of chocolate candy which had not been offered to me, but I helped myself anyway. I found out later that what I had eaten was not chocolate candy, but X-Lax. I will never forget that experience. After 4 years of living in the country, we moved back to town. No one had air conditioning in the 1930s, and in the summer we had to sleep with windows open and fans going. The dust bothered my father so bad he had asthma and hay fever. All that was many years ago, and now I stand on my porch at Springmore and I see the beauty that surrounds me. Springmore has truly the most beautiful grounds of anywhere around. I call it one step from heaven, and I am so very glad to be here. Thank you.
Thank you, Anne, for your Raleigh tales. Herb Reichlin is our last story. Doesn't this go by in a hurry? Maybe we should give him 9 minutes, do you think? Herb says it would help. Herb Reichlin is our last storyteller. He lives in Creedmoor Apartments and has been here 1 year. Okay, come on up.
I'm jealous of the southern accents. Let me put on glasses so that I won't stumble with this. How did a broiled flounder start me on my career of office automation systems analyst consultant? The answer illustrates the randomness of our lives, what made each of us, and the randomness of choice of how each of us got here, now, in this room, in Springmore. A lifetime is like a spider web of intersecting paths. Each decision point can take us in a direction that has no relation to the direction we thought we had selected. In 1953, after job interviews at Levi Strauss in San Francisco, I was invited to lunch with 4 people, the 3 division managers and a vice president. I ordered broiled flounder. Now some personal history. My parents were proof of what I had read in a psychiatrist's description of the people who came to this country. They were people different from their neighbors, so dissatisfied with their current lives, they were willing to risk the unknown of a new country. They came in 1911. How did I get born? What strange miracle matched up the seeds that created me? A me who tended to argue with teachers, who read a lot, was lousy at sports, and graduated high school at 16, not knowing how ignorant I was. The gods were good. I was able to go to Antioch College, a small and very liberal school in Ohio. I quit college in 1944 to enlist in the Army. Most of the country boys I met knew far more than this city boy. Winter combat in France and Luxembourg added education. Then a very difficult education, 18 months of Army hospitals to repair multiple wounds. After Army, Antioch, with more hospital interruptions, and then finally graduation. All fellow business administration classmates were offered jobs, but not me. My resume showing multiple hospital stays was not very appealing. Where to look for a job? My wife and I decided San Francisco. First unscheduled walk in the door and request interview stop was Levi Strauss & Company. I walked in. Levi Strauss was still family owned. The succession from Levi Strauss, the Gold Rush Days founder, had been on the daughter's side. Walter Haas was the president and his two sons the vice presidents. Their secretary, Rita Guani, was also the receptionist. I introduced myself and gave her my resume. Rita read it, got up from her seat, and took it into Walter Jr.'s office. The Irish might go for wounded warriors, or maybe her vibes told her my wife was Irish on both sides. About 40 minutes later, I met Walter, who told me that Rita would introduce me to each of the 3 division managers, and then we would all go to lunch. It was a seafood restaurant. I ordered broiled flounder. We were all served at the same time. Mine was a whole fish, not filleted. I looked down and began to prepare my fish for eating. Now some father-mother history. I was accustomed to eating fish. My mother's father, my grandfather, had a fish store in the lower section of Harlem. This would have been in the late 20s and 30s. During the Depression, my father lost his restaurant, and my mother opened a fish store in Upper Manhattan that was like her father's. The store had big water tanks that held live fish. Customers would make their choice. The fish would be netted, killed, scaled, cleaned, and at the customer's request, filleted. Fish was a regular food item in our house. Back to the flounder. I used a tine of the fork to trace down through the flesh over the spine, then used my knife to carefully slide the flesh off the skeleton and flop it over the side, and then with fork and knife remove the line of tiny bones that border the outer edges of the flesh. Then, with my fingers, take the tail and lift the spine out of the meat and put it on the side of the plate along with the skin and tiny bones. Finally, with knife and fork, slide the flesh off the skin and place the skin on top of the skeleton and the little bones. The clean, white, perfectly cooked fish was now in the middle of my plate, ready for eating. I looked up. And saw that neither Walter Jr. or the 3 division managers had finished their food, had touched their food. Instead, they were looking at the fish on my plate. This is why I believe not only got me hired, but after I was hired, while the Hasses kept giving me special projects as Levi's sales volume exploded. If I could clean a broiled flounder with such surgical precision, they must have figured I had the skill to solve the operating problems caused by their growth. 8 years later, I fell in love with the computer world and wanted to be part of it. An IBM vice president knew me and my work at Levi Strauss. He helped me get my first big company-related office automation systems analyst management assignment. It was the job that started my career. But my actual start, a broiled flounder.
Well, that's it for the day, and don't we thank all our storytellers who worked hard to prepare. They have shared a bit of themselves and entertained us at the same time, and we thank you all very much, and we look forward to hearing a story from you. And so until November the 20th, I believe, we bid you adieu, and we keep our ears open to hear from you that you have a story to tell as well. Thank you for coming.